Hi, how are you doing? So my story or my relationship with the bike, this is part 2 of my series. And in the previous series, I talked about how I first got into cycling, my first bike, or my first proper bike, and where I rode off-road for the first time. If you've not seen that one, I'll put a link to the video in the description. This video is sort of a step forward now from when I was 14 to when I was around 30-ish. I had a long spell of motorbikes and cars and all the rest of it. And then I used to smoke and I used to drink quite a bit. And then I wanted to get fit and healthy and also commute to work. So I thought, I'll backtrack slightly. I'd seen this, what really triggered it is I saw a bike in a window in Williams Cycles, which I'd previously mentioned is where I bought my first Carlton. As I say, this is the shop. And I saw it in the window. It was a Peugeot. I've got a sneaking feeling it was like a dark purple with chrome parts on it. It had welded the Y-shaped bars, all one piece. It had Suntour shifters on it with the little swivel adjusters on the top. If you're familiar with that time, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's got a little loop on the top, little metal clip, and you just tighten the shifter to give resistance. Long before any indexing or index gears. Knobbly tyres. And I was blown away when I saw this bike, completely blown away. And I went home and told my wife, God, you want to believe what I've just seen in a shop window? Anyway, so this was the start of me looking into mountain bikes and started buying magazines. In those days, there was very few, well, there weren't mountain bike magazines, there was just cycling magazines. And I saw an advert, I think I saw an advert for a Tushingham, which was, Tushingham was a windsurfing company. And they made, the guy who owned it, I think it was Lester Noble, made his own mountain bike. And there was a few other brands around then, Oldbury, and there was a few other little niche brands. Was it Oldbury? Anyway, there was a few brands popping up. Chas Davis made the dog's bollocks. So I started looking into bikes. So I thought, and this sort of steps on then to when I started to give up smoking. Actually, this is after I'd been bodybuilding for a period of time. And fell foul of being too big, too heavy, couldn't do anything. I bought this bike to get to work and I couldn't ride it. I bought a mountain bike. It was a Rally Maverick. It was gunmetal, metallic grey. This must have been 1985, possibly, I'm guessing a bit. And I remember getting on it and riding to the end of the road. I could hardly pedal because I'd been training in the gym for heavy weights and I just had no endurance in me at all. So I basically gave up training, gave up gym and started cycling and slowly started to lose weight, lose muscle and stuff and get fitter. And then I used to commute to work on the Rally. And as I was going to work, I used to pass this chap coming the other way. And he had 2 panniers on the back of this bike and it was yellow, it was white and blue. And I thought, wow, that looks so cool. He was coming up the road the other way and he really, really struck a chord with me. And I thought, I really love this bike. So anyway, my Rally Maverick then got stolen. I can't remember exactly where it was, from my house or it might have been from my house. Anyway, it got stolen and so I needed another bike. And then my eldest son, Stefan, also was into his bikes then. And so we went down to a local bike shop where I bought my previous Rally. It was Gloucester Cycle Centre, I think it was, on Northgate Street, I believe, and in Gloucester. And we went in and we bought 2 Rally Avantis, top of the range Rally mountain bikes, £550 each. And this is the bike. This is the very bike. That's what I bought. This isn't exactly original. It's the original frame, but during the period of time, the bike got taken apart. And I lost lots of parts, as you do. You strip things and you do all that. But luckily, a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine from Retro, who's into the retro bikes, he offered to rebuild the bike. He had the parts to do it, and he rebuilt it for me as you see it now, for nothing, just out of love and great friendship and fantastic. So it's been in our bike shop here, Slam69. Which I'll go into later, just sat gathering dust and doing nothing. I mean, it is rideable. I have ridden it, and I probably will ride it at some point, but yeah, how times have changed. So this bike, I think it's got 21 gears. I can't remember now. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 18 gears. And as you can see, it's got what they call biopace. So the rings are oval. These days we have oval rings that work properly. This didn't. This, you could feel this. It just didn't work properly. It was Shimano's attempt at something different and something new. It's also got this U-brake here, which is an American idea. It came from America, because all the early mountain bikes were sort of American-based designs. So the first ride I ever did was called the Bicycle Hard Ride. It was 1988, January 1988. It was mucky and wintry, and it was in Tanner's Hatch, and it was a one loop, and I think it was all one category. I can't remember how many riders there were. There's quite a few, got a couple of hundred riders, and some people I know since mentioning this were in it who ended up being quite well known. But this is really, really early days. Probably the first, well, it was the first mountain bike race I ever did. And but what happened was, I learned a big lesson. This bike, as soon as we hit any mud, this clogged up. So I was pushed this bike for most of the circuit. Absolutely terrible. And yeah, so when I finished that ride, I sort of vowed to do something and find something with more mud clearance. One other thing, so I'm just editing this video and I'm going through it, and obviously as you edit, you remember stuff. And I've just remembered when I did the Bicycle Hard Ride at Tanner's Hatch, there's one thing I forgot to mention. That is that whilst I was busy trying to get through the mud on that rally, I have a vivid memory of a guy who eventually won it, name of Bernie Shrewsbury. He was a SAS guy, and he was riding a Marin Titanium, and I remember he lapped me, and all I remember is these calves, these massive calves on this bloke as he went past, as I was pushing through the mud, and it stuck in my mind forever. And also there was a raffle for a titanium Marin frame, and I've recently had a message saying, because I posted something about this, from I think the person who won the frame. He was only a young lad at the time, maybe a young kid, but I swear he messaged the other day saying that he was the person that won it. So that's quite, if that's true, that's quite incredible. And the other thing is, there was a prize in that event for the muddiest rider. Guess who won it? Me. Okay, back to the story. So having had a experience of clogging up with mud, I was really, really keen to sort of sort it out. And I looked a lot through magazines for various ideas, what's new, and all the rest of it. And I was looking around for another bike, and I was also tinkering with the idea of making my own. I've always been one for not wanting to follow the mainstream, always like my own things, do it my own way. I am a creative person in my head, very creative, like to be original. Hence all this not conforming. And I saw in one of the magazines a little tiny advert for an American frame called a Funk. This is a picture of it, as you'll see. I've since found an article on this bike, and as you can see, it's quite unusual. It's got what they call elevated chainstay. So instead of the bottom bracket, or where the pedals are, and the rear frame going to the back wheel, it goes up and then it goes across. So the cranks are down here and it goes across and misses the crank. It's called an elevated chainstay. The part that goes from the crank to the back wheel is the chainstay. So I saw this and I just thought, I love that bike. I just love that. So it sowed a seed in my head thinking, and also other sort of bikes were looking, other companies were looking at doing this e-stay idea. So chucked a few ideas around. And at this point, I was actually nothing to do with bikes. I was working, I had my own landscape business, and we were making concrete products and all the rest of it, myself and my wife. And where we were based on a farm, and there was a chap there, an engineer who restored MGs. He was an MG enthusiast and an engineer and all the rest of it. And I was chatting to him about some ideas about how do you fancy making a bike. So he basically, we threw some ideas around, he drew something up and he made it. And it was an e-stay frame, and that was that. So we welded it all up and built it and took it into the car park, and it immediately broke. Because what we hadn't realised was, or we just hadn't remembered to do, is when you weld aluminium in this country, 6061 aluminium, you have to heat treat it after welding because it's really soft. So obviously this had not been heat treated, it's just welded, built, and as soon as we pedalled it, the crank, the bottom bracket just went and twisted completely 45 degrees. And also the design, I'll sketch and show you what the design was like, but it was obviously it had a slight problem as I redesigned it after this. But anyway, we made this one off and it didn't prove to work, but the seed was sown. At this point, I had then sold my landscaping business and we'd opened a bike shop. And this is 1991, I think, possibly. And the bike shop was called Bigfoot Mountain Bikes. Or no, it was actually called the Bigfoot Cycle Emporium. Now, something else I must mention is my dad has been a technical illustrator most of his life, or my dad was a technical illustrator, and we had drawing boards and all the rest of it. It was very old school, and I inherited one of his drawing boards from where he worked at Smith's Industries in Cheltenham, Bishop's Cleeve. I had it at home and I put it into my garage where I live now still, and this is where my office was. Right, I just need to butt in here. I've just got about to mention where my office is. I'm actually in it now. The video previously is being filmed in my shop, but this is where. So I've just mentioned the fact that this is where things were designed, and as you can see, the Artex roof ends there, and there used to be a wall, and then this here was my office where things were all made. And this picture here shows you me sat with one of the first frames. This was an anodised gold frame. We had a few done anodised. I think this was one of the 3 frames I had made initially. And yes, sat next to my drawing board. Proper old school. I then had we had the bike shop. I then had the mad idea of making my own frames. And my wife's brother knew a welder. And this guy, Satch, his name was, used to weld motorbikes, choppers, dragsters, you name it, he would weld it. Incredible good welder. And so I thought, well, I'll go and see him. So I went over to Colwell in Malvern, other side of Malvern. And this is where the first frames were created. It's a chicken shed. And if I can't find it, because I'm talking to this camera, hoping that I've filmed where it is, because I haven't been there yet when I'm saying this. But hopefully there's an image of the shed. And there's 2 sheds, one next to the other. And Satch was in one side, and 2 engineer guys were in the other side. 2 tool makers. So anyway, I went to see him, and he made me 3 prototypes, 3 frames. I gave him the drawings. We came up with everything, and all the little bits and bobs that we needed were made by the 2 guys in the shed next door. They made the bottom brackets, threaded it, the head tube, all the little cable guides were water cut, and so we basically put this thing together and then Satch welded it. We made 3 frames. So this was all over quite a short period of time, 1992, 93, with Bigfoot. I think it was about 1992 actually. And the bike was called, as I probably didn't mention, was called Bigfoot Mountain Bikes, named after me. My surname's Foot, and I'm big, so it was logical to call it Bigfoot, and it's in the woods and on the countryside. So the model name, because we were obviously planning to have more than 1 frame, so we called this the Bigfoot Smokestone. And that's where Smokestone started out. And the words or the name Smokestone comes from my best friend, previous to any bikes. Because before I got into bikes, we were into cars and CB radio, and Smokestone was his handle, his nickname. Mine was called Nitro. He was Smokestone. And he was my best friend by far, and we were quite close. And so when I was designing this bike, he was around, and I was trying to sort of, you know, he used to ride to work and stuff like that and all the rest of it. And I was getting this bike, this first frame made, as I mentioned, in this chicken shed. And Dave had a, not a heart attack, but he collapsed on the way to work one day. And he apparently had an inherited problem with a vein in his heart. The main aorta had a weakness, and he was rushed into hospital. And I think a couple of days later, he literally dropped dead. He just died. It's, yeah, took a lot to... Anyway, so he never saw the frame. So I said to his wife, who I was really close with, and his children, and his wife Debbie, that I would name the frame after him. So the first frame became the Bigfoot Smokestone. That's where that comes from. So we're now at the stage where I have frames, and obviously the shop's going along merrily, and we look at doing race. We thought, oh, we need to promote our bike. What's the best way to do it? Because there's no internet or anything like that. So we did some adverts in magazines, and we also sorted out a race team with some of the people that I rode with. So local riders, Rob Buckland, Graham Weaver, and one very special person, Jason Hughes, became our first team. This then sort of grew as other people joined. But I'll just mention that Jason Hughes, who I mentioned, he became very, very close to me. We became very close, did a lot of stuff, had very crazy ideas, both very creative. So bounced lots of ideas around, and we did a lot of things. But the first time I met Jason was when he rode past my shop, rode past the front door of the shop. And I thought, what the hell? And there's this chap went by with this skin suit on, looking like he should be in indoor track. And he had two disc wheels with Fablon spirals like this, as it went past like this down the road. And it looked really, really crazy. And an aero helmet and all the rest of it. But he made everything himself. So he was very sort of, he had no money. He was still at college, I believe, still at university, and working in McDonald's at the same time. So anyway, one day came in the shop, or I think I might have gone out and spoke to him. And we got chatting and talking about stuff. And I was thinking, oh, this chat will be really, really good for promoting my bikes. And he did race, and he was pretty rapid. So that was that. And then Graham Weaver was also part of a previous club that I'd been in, Gloucester Hillbillies. And so he came along as well. He was really strong young rider. And another one was Rob Buckland, as I mentioned, who was a proper racer, a proper serious racer. So it was really nice to get him to take, to want to ride our bikes. And all of the riders, all of them did well. One other guy I've got to mention, which then came along later, is a young lad, Paul Dangerfield. Paul proved to be, he stayed with me quite a long time, even after Bigfoot, which I'll mention later on. But yeah, he was something special. He was junior national champion, youth national champion, and I've got a picture of him here with. He borrowed my bike, which had a Tioga disc drive, which you can see in the back. A Tioga disc drive it's a rear wheel which is designed to give you some compliance, because there's no suspension now at the moment. This is really early days. Rear suspension was very quirky, but to keep the weight down, the idea was to have this wheel which was, instead of having metal spokes, it had Kevlar thread threaded through, but from the rim to the hub, like spokes but with Kevlar. And on the outside you'd have this protective plastic coating covering. And it used to make this fantastic drumming noise when you were riding the bike. And it was quite cool for intimidating the rider in front of you if you wanted to psych them out. Because I used to race then, I raced with this back wheel. And yeah, that's right, yeah, I did race with it. And so I was just thinking then, because we were sponsored by Carrymore, because, yeah, anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So there's a video actually, which I'll put a link to, called Shred. And there's a section in that video of somebody riding a mongoose bike with a disc drive in it. and you can hear the destroy rumbling along, and then you can hear where the guy takes some air, goes dead quiet, and then lands again. You can hear this wheel. It's really cool. So yeah, that was the race team, and then the other thing that we used to do for promotion was we used to attend the Malvern Classic, which I had been going to previous, just as a racer. So we went along for the first time with Bigfoot with a tent and all kinds of stuff. Oh, and one person I've also really should have mentioned by now is a chap who did all our artwork, all my artwork, and that's Dave Ford. And he was a really artistic guy. I've got a picture of him here, sat next to our tent in the Malverns actually, and he designed the logo. He designed adverts for us. He did all kinds of stuff. He drew a big Bigfoot, which we then cut out and had outside the tent. I don't think I've got a picture of that, but we were so sought after that people actually wanted to buy that big Bigfoot off us at the end. So it went. I think we might have given it away actually. So yeah, we went to the Malverns, and it was the national champs when we went the first time. So that the National Race Series was held there. National Championships, UK Championships, were held at the Malverns. We did really well. We had another lad racing for us called Ivan Marchant. He was racing in the expert category, and he won. But unfortunately, at that point, there's no national medal for the expert category. But yeah, he won it. And the other lads did really well as well. I can't remember the exact details, but they were there. I've got a picture here of Jason actually as well, racing at the same race. And we had green one-piece skin suits made with red flames. I was trying to get a colour that no one else had or a design. It does look a bit weird now, but at the time it stood out because there was nothing else like it. We also had sponsors from the shop. We had NutriWest, which was a drinks company. We had all kinds of Zero glasses, all kinds of stuff. Was it Zero glasses? Zero Components and something else, glasses company. And so we turned up looking very pro. So before actually, at this point, I must say, I sort of skipped a bit out, that to make our frames, the two guys who I mentioned earlier, the two tool makers in the chicken shed next to where we had the welding done, actually they saw the potential in what we were doing, and they really wanted to get involved. So they put a proposition to me where they would join. We would form a three-way partnership. They would do the manufacturing, I do the development and sales, and we'd go from there. So we made another batch of frames, and they also did a deal with another company where they sold their business to another company, and one of the guys there's two tool makers, one would go and work for that company and the other one would work with me, and we would be funded. They had a pot of cash. Obviously they were bought out, so they had a pot of cash to maintain the one chap with me and develop the frames. Unfortunately, the other chap changed his mind and didn't go to work for the other company and came with us, so they had no income, which was a little bit tricky, and it did end up causing us to split. This was autumn time. You come into Christmas. After Christmas, sales vanish. Everybody knows, retail bike trade, sales just grind to a halt. So they were eating cash like no tomorrow, and sales were stopping, and we had a fallout basically over money. So we parted company. And just before this, actually, which was something else I haven't mentioned, not long after the Malverns that year, we'd had a letter, or I'd received a letter from Muddy Fox. And they had told me, or told us, that we could not use the word Bigfoot, and we couldn't use a paw print, which is what we had on our logo. And because they owned it, they owned the trademark. So, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So we sat down, and between the three of us, the two guys came up with a name. It wasn't really my preferred name, but it became the name of the brand, Ozone Bikes. And this was sort of the start of the rot, really. And anyway, so when we split up, they carried on with Ozone Bikes. That almost became their brand. They developed a normal rear triangle frame, not an E-stay. And it didn't last very long. I think it lasted about 6 months and fizzled out. And also, later after that, I'd gone to a trade show and I'd seen my frame on the stand. Actually, no, I've missed a bit. I'll just stop there. Right, so to recap, we'd lost a trademark, lost our name, got a new one, and I'd fallen out and we'd split. So this is spring 93, I believe. Yeah, it must be 93. And whilst we were manufacturing previously with our business, another company down in Eastbourne had been buying frames from us. Reason being is the frame that, I can't show you here because I haven't got it handy, but the frames that we made, both the rear dropouts used to come off. They were bolt on. And the idea was you could bolt on a disc brake mount, take out your, swap it around. And you could also change the colours. So because both rear dropouts were removable, this company in Eastbourne developed a rear suspension system called Softail. And it bolted on to the rear of the frame. And it was two like the rear axle was on a pivot, like a parallelogram pivot, which went up and down and had two elastomers suspension springs inside to give it an X amount of travel. And then on the back of the frame, you had the rear stay coming down the back of the frame. And then next to it, where off this parallelogram, you had another stay, which then went to a little pivot at the top. And it worked. It did prove to really turn some heads, and we did sell a couple, not many. Anyway, so because this company used to buy our frames, they said to me, well, what are we going to do now? You've ceased making them. How about you come and make them with us? You come and work with us and we'll make them in-house. So that's what I did. I went down to Eastbourne to their little factory and got chatting with them. And the chap's name was Mick Sefton, who ran the little business down there. And he had a business partner called Jonathan. I can't remember his second name, but Jonathan owned a car audio business. We formed a new company called Smokestone. So Smokestone was reborn, and we used the Bigfoot logo still. I still had that. In the Gloucester Hillbillies, there was a rider called Steve Arnold. He was part of our group, really good rider. And he was an artist, loved his music, but an artist. Ended up with a graphics company, I think, later on. But anyway, he designed the Yeti Man, the Bigfoot Yeti. And he designed it whilst me and him, we were sat in his kitchen in his house, and ZZ Top were playing on his record player. I forget what track it was, but all we could think about was ZZ Top, sunglasses, big beards, and we came up with this logo. So that's down to Steve Arnold. Started making frames again, got a welder in, we got some write-ups in magazines. Something else I haven't mentioned, which I will touch on in a moment. Yeah, so we got tests in magazines. And then again, we went to the Malvern Classic. This time we had a terrific range of frames. We could make quite a lot, all anodized, different colours. And we had a big pyramid, like a pyramid on it's a central pole with all these frames going up in a big pyramid in different sizes and colours. And loads of people interested. We also had a close friend who came along, and had a lot of supporters then, came along and said, oh, you do realise there's a young lad doing some trials, or trying to, on an old bike, because the two Martins were doing a display, a trials display, and this lad wanted to join in. I think it was a bit of a competition. And so he rushed into me and said, you should give him a bike. I said, what? Yeah, you should give him a bike, build him a bike. So I built him a bike in a roughly half an hour to 45 minutes from scratch. We had wheels, thankfully built the rest of it, put it all together, gave him the bike. He went out and he did really, really well, got loads of interest, loved the bike, and we sponsored him for a while with this bike. And so that was good. So that's the Malvern Classic. And then we're getting towards the end of the 3-day festival, and then I get a message saying, we've got an investor. I was thinking, oh, this is amazing. We're all getting really buzzed. We thought, this is fantastic. This is just what we wanted. So money being put into the pot. And apparently Jonathan had done a deal with somebody. I didn't know who it was, and all I was told was to come to the office on Monday morning, and we all would become clear. So anyway, Malvern's over, cleared up, went home, went into the office. It may not have been a Monday, but anyway, it was the day after the show. Went down, travelled all the way down to Eastbourne, went into the office, sat down with the two other partners, and in walked in two guys, father and son. And the older gentleman's name was Mr. Ajipetru, who was the former owner of Muddy Fox, funnily enough. So he's obviously been following my trail of what I've been doing, because he was the one that stopped me using that trademark in the first place. And his son was with him. These guys own Psychological, if I remember rightly, in London. And anyway, so they walked in, and the first thing on the agenda was, they walked round to me and they said, "I'm Graham, I'd like you to leave." And I was completely dumbfounded. "Yes, we'd like you to leave, please. We don't need you in the company." And the two guys sat next to me, my two partners, just looked at the floor and ignored me and never said a word. So they obviously done a deal that didn't include me, and that was that. So I drove back to Gloucester with my rather depressed, all the way back to Gloucester, mind-boggling, going, what the hell has just happened? And then I was back to my shop. Yeah, I went back to the shop, and that was it. And at this time, it was a case of, oh my goodness me, my head was spinning with whatever. Anyway, then I got letters sent to me saying, "You need to pay this bill, you need to pay that bill." And I went, whoa, hang on a minute. No, I don't. This is all part of the company that was running, nothing to do with me personally. It's part of the company that you bought, so it's your debt, nothing to do with, it's not a personal debt of mine. So I didn't get any money out of me anyway. And that was the end of that. And then I said, to hell with it. I'm having nothing to do with making bikes anymore. Two bad experiences. History. So just to slightly recap on one thing I mentioned about magazine reviews, is the former bike, the first bike, the Bigfoot Smokestone, was reviewed by who I class, and who a lot of people class as one of the best UK bike reviewers or bike journalists, and that was the late Steve Warland. And he tested the original Bigfoot Smokestone for MTB Pro magazine and voted it the best e-stay bike he'd ever ridden. And that really, really mattered to me. That really was quite a feather in our cap, because he'd ridden a lot of them. There's quite a few different brands out there, but they were usually quite flexy at the bottom bracket, whereas mine wasn't. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. So anyway, that is probably as far as I'm going to go in this chapter, because I could go on and on and on. So that's pretty much it for now. Okay, coming up in the next part of this series, Bigfoot Mountain Bike Club starts. Frame manufacturing, what do you think? Does it come back? Wait and see. Okay, like and subscribe, click the little bell, get subscribed, you'll get a notification, and hopefully come back and follow the rest of this story. Lots more to come. Okay, take it easy.